I think at the end of the day, companies need to do both. And I think what decides what you focus on when, one, what type of business you are. Look, if you're a commoditized business and you have kind of the same feature set or you have a similar product as everyone else, yeah, brand is going to be very important because how else do you win? The other thing I would say is it really depends what stage of the business you're at. So if you're just beginning, yeah, you're not going to be able to invest a ton of money on just brand marketing because you need to prove the ROI. Or if you're a bootstrap business, you need to make sure the dollars that you're spending are getting a return. This is a mistake that a lot of marketers make is they look at these large companies. They'll look at Airbnb, they'll look at Nike, they'll look at like Uber, and they'll say, see, this company is doing this. That means we should do it too. Well, these companies have like tens of billions or hundreds of billions of dollars. And you're trying to say that your small business or your SaaS business that's making, I don't know, 100K ARR should use the same marketing strategy that Nike should use. Like it just doesn't even make sense.
So welcome to the Grow and Convert Marketing Show. Today we're going to be talking about brand versus performance marketing. Basically, I'm going to interview Benji because he has some thoughts on this based on a post that's been circulating in the marketing ecosystem. I really had to stretch my words to not use the term viral because I don't think it's necessarily gone viral, about Nike and some decisions they made, and then how people are making conclusions about brand versus what I guess kind of corporate marketers refer to as direct response marketing. But in general, before we get started, if you like these discussions, these in-depth discussions, please like and subscribe to us on YouTube if that's what you're listening and watching, or subscribe or review us on your podcast player. Grow and Convert is a content marketing and PPC agency, but this podcast is just us having larger content or marketing discussions in general, including but not limited to content and SEO. So, Benji, you should start by giving a summary, or if you want, I can give at least my kind of slightly outsider summary of this LinkedIn post that someone wrote about Nike and how they lost a bunch of shareholder value and revenue because of a switch they made a few years ago from quote unquote brand marketing to direct response marketing.
Sure, you can give a summary, or I can just go into the threads and we can talk through it.
Well, yeah, the LinkedIn posts, and we can project this on YouTube, and we'll obviously link to the post, is by a guy, Massimo Guinco.
Yeah, good luck pronouncing your Italian there.
my apologies to Massimo and his last name. It's fine. As someone who's named Davish Canal spelled the way it is, like I feel like I feel for him. He says basically in short that in 2020 at some point there was a new CEO of Nike, John Donahoe, replacing the old CEO Mark Parker, and he also got a new president of like consumer product and brand. I love these big enterprise companies and all of these like random like what does the president of consumer product and brand do that's different than the CEO? I'm sure there's a very good answer, and I'm just showing myself as being completely oblivious to how enterprise companies work. But nonetheless, the post says what they ended up doing is a few things, 3 things, but the main one was becoming a D2C-led company, direct to consumer, meaning having majority or focusing their sales on sales from Nike.com as opposed to wholesale, meaning sending their shoes to, I don't know, like a Foot Locker or whoever, and a million other department stores and shoe stores, and selling it that way. The other sort of smaller changes was they were going to eliminate categories. So like football shoes versus soccer versus this, that, and the other. And then along with being D2C, change its marketing to focus on like this is what I was calling direct response, which I'm realizing I might be just a word that I inserted and he didn't actually say, like data driven marketing and digital marketing led, which later in the long LinkedIn post it says it's like a lot of performance marketing, or I don't know, like just various online ads. And I don't remember in the post, Benji, if they say, and this is a key detail to this discussion,
Yeah.
what
Here, I
what
have the post right here. Really
what
interesting.
marketing were they? Yeah, I have it up as well. What marketing were they not doing? Like what marketing did they stop doing? Like I don't know if I don't think they stopped doing a lot of their, I'm just going to call it that. I don't think Nike called it that, like influencer marketing. Like they still have like famous athletes sponsoring and they have
No,
commercials.
I think they made a switch to having it being more data driven, I guess, as opposed to prior they did a lot more brand marketing that wasn't data driven. I think that was the main switch. And so I think that's what a lot of people latched onto. I mean, I'm going to start with just different posts that I've seen over the last few days. And I think it's funny because marketers are now just taking sides and basically pulling what they want from this story out and making the case for why their marketing function should get more spend or priority within their own organization based off this story. So, for example, you see this brand marketer, founder of Brand Zen, basically saying every CMO should read this story because it basically outlines how the Nike moved from a brand driven model to a data driven model, and then they released their earnings in 2024 and lost $25 billion in a day. And this is the sole reason why. And so I think this is what's funny about the narrative that came from this story is Nike had one bad earnings release and everyone equates that $25 billion drop to Nike moving to performance marketing, even though this happened in 2020 and it's now 4 years later. And then all of a sudden this one bad earnings released is now because of this switch that happened 4 years ago. So that doesn't make too much sense to me, but okay, like it that doesn't really matter. And you can kind of see here all these different posts from these different people just basically saying performance marketing sucks, brand is the best way to do it, Nike has always grown off of brand, and this is why you shouldn't measure anything. So like Nike invested billions into something that was less effective but easier to measure versus something that was more effective and less easy to measure. And so the conclusion is you should do marketing that's not easy to measure because that's what grows companies, essentially. Here's another example on LinkedIn. Kind of the same thing. What went wrong? The erosion of the brand. They skimped on brand building, and then they lost $25 billion in market cap.
The details of that sentence I think are important. It
Sure.
said if they skimp on building, reducing, what was it? Brand awareness.
Yeah, here we can pull it back up. So, yeah, Nike skimped on brand building, costing them mind share, brand prominence, and $25 billion in market cap. And then this person then goes to sell their own product based off this. We built this as a way to measure brand building ad effectiveness. Yeah, but what I find really interesting about the story is everyone pulls what they want out of it and makes the case for why they should do brand instead of performance marketing. And I think it's a timely story in that I think we've talked about this on a number of episodes so far, but this is kind of just what's happening in the broader marketing sphere overall in terms of just the conversations that are being had is there's this big shift from the last 10 to 15 years have been really focused on measuring the performance of marketing because you had the proper attribution tools in place. The last 10 or 15 years were really driven by online advertising for a lot of businesses. So companies invested a lot in Facebook, Google ads, and those were very easy to measure. And I think over the last 2 or 3 years, that's become a lot more difficult in terms of ad performance has gone down, I would say, overall. Like if you talk to a lot of D2C brands, a lot of them over the last 10 years were built off of paid advertising, and that's gotten a lot more challenging, mainly due to the switch in iOS tracking that happened, I believe, 2 or 3 years ago. And then on top of that, this year you have GA4 being rolled out, which becomes a lot harder for brands to measure the performance of their marketing. And so the conversation has moved from measure everything to let's not measure anything, and brand is the most important thing. And to me, I think this conversation is much more nuanced than just drawing that conclusion from one story or just from kind of this shift that has been happening as marketing has become more challenging to measure.
To be fair to those posts, I didn't see in those posts, and I would imagine if any of those guys were on like right now and having a conversation with us, I didn't see them say don't measure anything. But yes, they were using that Nike LinkedIn post as an example of like, without saying it, they were kind of implying
that brand marketing is more important than performance marketing. And that's what I don't agree with, because I think I think at the end of the day, companies need to do both. And I think what decides what you focus on when, one, what type of business you are. So look, if you're a commoditized business and you have kind of the same feature set or you have a similar product as everyone else, yeah, brand is going to be very important, because how else do you win? And like if you are Nike and you sell running shoes and there's 10 other brands or 100 other brands that sell running shoes, how are you going to win? You can't just say my shoe is better.
Because to 99.99% of people who buy Nikes versus Adidas versus whatever, the shoes are undetectable. I'm sure like a bunch of runners that are listening are going to be like, no, Davish. But like, let's be honest. The majority of people buying Nikes are us and like regular people, and the shoes are a commodity. It's like, other than the brand logo on it, it's the actual performance and features is undetectable.
Yeah, so that's one thing I would say on the brand versus performance. The other thing I would say is it really depends what stage of the business you're at. So if you're just beginning, yeah, you're not going to be able to invest a ton of money on just brand marketing, because you need to prove the ROI. Or if you're a bootstrap business, you need to make sure the dollars that you're spending are getting a return. And I think this is a mistake that a lot of marketers make, is they look at these large companies. They'll look at Airbnb, they'll look at Nike, they'll look at like Uber,
Apple.
and they'll say, see, this company is doing this. That means we should do it too. Well, look, these companies have like tens of billions or hundreds of billions of dollars. And you're trying to say that your small business or your SaaS business that's making, I don't know, 100K ARR should use the same marketing strategy that Nike should use. Like, it just doesn't even make sense. And this
it's more than just the funding difference. Yes, Nike, Uber, Apple have way more budget than you do, and so they can do things and take bets. But to me, there's a bigger issue. Even if you had the budget of them, there's this big thing that money can't buy immediately, which is they have massive brand awareness and mind share in their space already. If you are looking to buy a phone or a computer, Apple does not need to show up in a search to tell people we sell phones or computers. Nike does not need to do grow and convert and be like top 10 running shoes. Like, everybody knows what Nike is when you're looking for shoes, especially athletic shoes, right? If you're looking for a ride share, Uber and Lyft don't need to like say, hey, we do this. You know, we can take you to the club and then back. So that I think is the number one thing. And the second thing I wanted to add to what you said is it's not just like the scale at which this doesn't apply is not just tiny startups. I have seen, especially on the GrowthRock A/B testing side, the agency I've had outside of Grow and Convert for a million years, clients who are D2C e-commerce, and there's this debate between what my A/B testing firm does and the client team that's like advocating for us of optimizing conversion rates and their Google ads, and the brand team that often says, we can't change the website to do that because there's this brand consideration or whatever. And so I see the microcosm of this fight. Even $50 million a year companies, I think, can't be equating their marketing. Like, I have had clients who make, in that order, tens of millions of revenue, let's say 30, 50 million a year, D2C from the website, where we have debates about changes to make on the website, and someone from the brand team brings up LVMH, in other words, the parent company of Louis Vuitton, or they bring up a Nike or whatever, and you're like, I have to bite my tongue to be like, sorry, who is Louis Vuitton in this conversation? Like, what are you talking about? Like Louis Vuitton, when you have like the richest rappers on the planet talking about your brand in rap songs and carrying it and wearing it on Instagram, and you have Kim Kardashian showing up courtside to a Lakers game and putting your purse down on like the court, then we can talk about us imitating Louis Vuitton's thing or Birkin or whatever. Like, nobody, like, even if you have a little bit of brand presence, you are not them. And so the mechanism of what marketing channel is important changes. So going to Grow and Convert, right? The big thing we do is show up, put our clients in searches when someone's searching for that product category to say, like, you're looking for IT security software, and you type in like best IT security software, we have our clients show up with the number 1 or number 2, number 3 blog post and mention their IT security software at length and sell it. If you are one of those companies, let's do the B2B software equivalent of them. If you are Salesforce, which I would argue is the Apple, Nike, Louis Vuitton of their category, you don't need that. That's the Grow and Convert, using Grow and Convert as an example of performance marketing. Because anybody looking for a CRM, Salesforce is already on their radar. Just like anybody looking for a luxury handbag, Louis Vuitton is on their radar. Anybody looking for running shoes, Nike is on their radar. Like, it just is, you don't need that. But you are not them. If, like, you ask yourself, does everybody looking at the category know me? If not, then your Google ads are actually really important. Your like direct response social ads, your Instagram, Facebook ads that literally are not just some like brand thing, but are literally telling you like there's a sale or go here, use this discount code, are really important. And your SEO that's bottom of the funnel becomes really important. But so that's, I think, is regardless of budget. You don't have the brand awareness to ignore performance marketing.
Yeah, but the other argument that I'll make is performance marketing is to some extent brand marketing, and so like here's one example. I have a friend that owns a t-shirt company. He advertises online his t-shirt company. People see his brand name. That's like brand awareness. You're growing your brand. So this idea of brand marketing versus performance marketing doesn't even make sense. One, the more you spend on, like, performance marketing, people are considering ads. So let's just say like Facebook ads, Google ads, something like that. The more times you show up in front of the right audience, even paying for that audience, even if your main goal isn't just strictly to drive conversions, the more it's going to grow your brand. And I can tell you a lot of these D2C brands in the very beginning, that is how they grew their brand, was they just paid for ad placements. They were just trying to be everywhere, and they paid their way in and then slowly grew a brand over time. And I think that's very true for most businesses. Like, most businesses aren't going to have a separate line item budget just to spend on brand marketing, because you need to be able to measure the performance in the very beginning. And then as you grow and you have more money, you can do more creative things and you can spend money on things that aren't as measurable. And so I just think this whole debate around performance versus brand, and people saying, look, this Nike case study or story shows the reason why you shouldn't invest in performance marketing and just focus on brand initiatives. It doesn't make sense. Look, I think brand and performance are sort of one and the same in terms of just spending that money. And look, you need to do both. And I think it's funny that like people in different functions, obviously I get why they're fighting for their own function, but just this whole debate on one versus the other just doesn't make any sense to me.
I think what would be an interesting discussion is what do we think, or what do you think companies at various sizes, what would the investment in brand look like? I have my thoughts on this because we know the investment in programmatic, like we've talked about it in a bunch of other episodes. You can read articles at growandconvert.com about the SEO side. So like just to cover that, regardless of your size will probably more just dictate budget on the what does performance marketing look like, but it's going to be like the usual digital marketing channels, right? Paid social, paid search, SEO, are being like the big ones, but you also have like programmatic advertising, which is sort of like display or banner ads and etc. So that's probably just going to scale up and down, and we can talk about the nuances of that. But more interesting that we don't talk about in one of these episodes that I think would be useful to talk about now is let's take 3 tiers. Tier 1 is really small companies. We're talking about bootstrapped. And I think we can talk about both like a D2C e-commerce hypothetical and a B2B. And then what I'm going to call like medium size, like SMB, maybe the M, which people define in different ways. But let's just assume like millions of dollars of revenue already, like established sales. And then the enterprise, Nike or maybe like less than Nike. What does brand marketing mean there? I mean, I can go first to seed it for you, but to me, I think a big thing is at the beginning stages, and let me just do some contrasting. For Nike, brand marketing means paying LeBron James untold sums to wear Nikes and like be a Nike rep. Or like, for example, Caitlin Clark has taken over sort of WNBA and women's basketball and has this famous thing of her WNBA salary is $75,000 a year. Yes, really, or something on that order. And then she signed an 8-year contract with Nike for like $25 million, right? To sort of explode that. That's an example of brand marketing. I don't know the details of anything else brand marketing that Nike does, but like those are the things that are like you're capable of doing at that level. You can't do that when you're at the other 2 levels. The mid-size, even one, like a $30 million company, you cannot get LeBron James or Serena Williams.
I don't think you go after people that big. I think it goes back to how commoditized your product is versus not. And I'll explain why in a little bit. But let's take like the small D2C company. Small D2C company, let's say you're making somewhere between like $1 and $10 million a year. Yeah, you're not going to go after and sponsor some large athlete, but you could go after micro influencers that would basically have a target audience of people that would potentially buy from you. Send them product, try to get them to post. This is what a lot of companies do just to get awareness in the early days for their target market. Same thing, if you're a SaaS company, you could do the same thing here. You could partner with influencers that target the same audience that you do, try to get them to share your product, and do stuff like that. You could also try to get your story placed in news publications. That's, again, on both sides. I think for a D2C company, I remember specifically that's what Allbirds did in the very beginning. They had this story, like an advertorial or like an editorial story posted on some tech publication about why this was the next big shoe. And that really blew up their brand in the very beginning. It's just getting a lot of press. And same thing on the B2B SaaS side. You could do the same thing. There's tons of companies that have launched that way, had a story in TechCrunch or something like that about what they're doing differently. And that's helped grow their brand in the very beginning.
And that's what I was kind of calling tier 2. So a company that has some revenue, you have some budget to be able to even do micro-influencers. Here's my thought on tier 1. If you're like a smaller company and you're like, man, like I don't even have budget for that. So you use whatever marketing budget you have, you're using on that, performance marketing stuff. Let's say you're doing something like what we do and you're ranking for high intent keywords. Someone's looking for your, I don't know, like AI powered blah, 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 blah software. And you're ranking for the keyword of someone looking for that software. On the brand side, something that's not in this LinkedIn discussion because it's about Nike and Nike's been around for 1 million years and has it, that you can do when you're tiny is just your messaging. Forget the influencers. Forget the budgets and the things outside of the site. The first thing you should think about when you think about, oh, what are we doing for our brand marketing site, is something you and I have talked about a lot for years since we wrote our first positioning article on our site. Is like, what does your site say about your brand? I would argue, not to toot our own horn, in our tiny sliver of the universe of content marketing strategy, blah, 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 we have a little bit of a brand, right? We have not done any influencer marketing. I mean, I guess you could asterisk that. Like, sure, we have been on other people's podcasts. We have done some guest posts. That's true. But it has not been an intentional part of our strategy. But where we focused a lot of our time is, what are we saying on our own website? We happen to use as a tool long form written articles. You don't need to. If you're selling a SaaS tool, like let's say some new CRM, to continue the Salesforce example, you have some CRM for dentists or some very niche or specific thing or whatever. There, your brand investment should start not with what other podcasts can I get into, but kind of thinking through the questions that Benji was asking earlier, which is, are we commoditized? And a lot of our SaaS companies and founders would argue no. And whether or not you debate with them, if your feeling is no, like we have this really strong stance on this particular thing, like regular CRMs and Salesforce don't work for dentists and whatever offices or something, and so you've created something that's like specific to them. That's good. Your brand marketing has to start first with like a message. And that message is conveyed first. Like, does your website convey that message? And then how else do you get it out? We happen to have a tactic called Disruption Stories. We've done a show on this and a podcast episode on this. We have stories on this, whatever. But like, you can do it in other ways. Then you can go to guest posts, podcasts, or whatever, and micro influencers or mega influencers or whatever in your industry, partners, to get that message across. But the first step is getting that message there. So you're jumping ahead when you look at a Nike, just like you were saying. They've done that years ago in the ages of Phil Knight, of like, just do it. They have this, when you think Nike, what do you think of? You think of like athletics and performance and Serena Williams and Michael Jordan and LeBron James. Like, that's what you think of, right? You think like, if I'm serious, if I'm going to be cool, like whether it's just like fashion fitness shoes to just like wear around, sneakerhead culture, or actual shoes, like Nike has this ethos of like, we are one of the best. That doesn't come on accident.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that is one of the mistakes that I see, is people are trying to grow their brand before they've really defined who they are and what they do. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like if you're starting off from the very beginning, you have to figure out what is the differentiator. Like what is that statement? So Nike's is just do it. There's everyone has their own unique statement, which basically is their like value prop typically, or it derives from their value prop or like what they want to be known for, and then they grow that. But yeah, you're right that a lot of people just don't think about that.
So I think tactically, to answer my own question in a really pragmatic way, at that tier one, early stage companies, you don't have millions in revenue. I think one thing you can do is say, like, the boxes you should be checking to do what we're advocating on this episode of sort of, you can do both. Brand and performance marketing are not antithetical or mutually exclusive, rather. They're obviously not antithetical, but that they're not mutually exclusive. You can do both. At that tier one, I think an example would be step one, like box to check, get your positioning right. What does our brand represent? When someone lands on our, and then I think the best place to start where you message that is the website. Like, are we highlighting some difference? If we are commoditized on features or whatever, what is it, price?
Yeah, no, this is actually a very good exercise. And you're right. So like when that earlier example, when you said, I'm some small D2C brand, or maybe some like decently sized D2C brand, and I want to model myself after Birkin or Louis Vuitton. Well, like, I would ask that company, okay, are you positioned as a premium brand? Like, yeah. What? Like,
that could be fine, by the way. You could literally be like, have some really fine Italian leather from some town or whatever, and like, you literally are one of the best. That's totally okay.
For sure. But I would say, if you're not, then you're going to run into problems trying to copy what a premium brand is trying to do, because they're trying to separate themselves from the commoditized companies and saying like, look, we're better in X, Y, and Z way, and we cost more. And so the marketing tactics and the strategies are going to be much different for a company that's positioned as a premium company versus someone who isn't and who has a low price point.
And let me give us a few other examples. We have, or both the Growth Rock and Convert work with other brands, for example, that are their brand differentiator is a philanthropic or charitable or like world good thing. Then you just need to get that straight. That when people see your stuff, and I'm using your website as like the first place you can control it, that's like free, but that decision on what your positioning is will apply later to all of your advertisements and what you say if you get featured on podcasts or whatever, what you want the influencers to say that you work. So that positioning is the overall idea. And the website is just one place, the first easiest place to control and get it right. So the philanthropic or charitable one was like, anytime someone is exposed to our brand, we want them to sort of think about our environmental impact or our societal impact. And like, you got to get that right. You got to get the messaging of that right and like be really intentional about it. Or moving to more B2B like software stuff, a lot of our clients and all our disruption story stuff is they often have a brand message of this existing process is broken and it's not working. And it's a very like niche message that only applies to people that like know about their specific space, right? And so our version of that is the traditional top of funnel content, strategy is broken, and you should be doing bottom of funnel. And here's why. And our brand also involves a lot of data that when you read something or listen to something from Grow and Convert, we back it up with actual data, whereas everyone else just like talks about it at a theoretical level. So like you get that right, and it can come in a lot of different flavors. Then you can, and a practical way is do one thing to try to get the brand message across while you're doing your direct response performance marketing bottom of funnel stuff. That's like a great place to start. So for us, what we've advocated before, but you don't have to do it this way, is from a content respect, that's what we do is like we say, okay, we're going to go after all of these bottom of funnel keywords, which you can equate to the SEO version of performance marketing. And then we'll do one disruption story that we spend hundreds of dollars a month on ads, like social ads, to like constantly get people exposed to it. We do that with ourselves now. We didn't used to back in the day when we were growing, but now we have the means to do it where we have our version of the disruption story, like how or why we started. You can find a link. It's like up on the homepage of our site, our like backstory. And we continue to sort of like drip ad budget. It's not a huge amount to it, but that's the place you can start. And for a D2C brand, it could be a few Instagram posts or something, or like paid posts where you sort of have a larger message around your food product or apparel product or what have you. Whether it's like the charitable message or the health message or the something is broken in the way we used to do it message, or just like a coolness message. You get a couple influencers. Do like one thing in addition is like a good place to start, and then you can scale as you get bigger. What do you think about this whole argument in the post about the measurement thing? Because as I say that, the next question I think that I would ask if I was listening to that is, okay, that's fine. I can do that one brand type investment or marketing tactic, and then I'll do the performance marketing stuff. I can measure how many customers, sales, demos, whatever, my Google ads brought in, or the way we do it, our SEO brought in. But then how do I know whether to measure more on brand? What do I do there?
I think you should measure on brand. That's why I don't understand where, and this is what I don't understand why people think brand is not a measurable channel. Like it for sure is. So like, look, if you're to put billboards all over the city, that's technically considered like brand marketing.
Yeah. How would you measure that?
Yeah, like what we do on our forums. We just ask how you heard about us, and people will tell you how they heard. Maybe it's from a friend. Sure, that can be considered brand. Maybe it's from a billboard, or they saw an advertisement somewhere. They heard about you from someone. That's all considered brand, and you can like use that information to determine what's working and what's not working. But this idea that you're just spending money and that you should be okay with spending money and there's no way to measure what you're spending money on, like that's what I take issue with. Like there's this whole culture that's moving more towards the just spend money and don't measure. It's like, okay, like even brand activities, you still need to measure if it's working. You can't just dump hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars into pumping your name out there and it has no effect on sales at all. Like, why would you keep doing that? And that's like there's this like growing group of people that are pushing this narrative, and I don't think it's true. Just because something's brand doesn't mean it's not measurable, and just because something's performance marketing, that also doesn't mean you're going to be able to measure everything. Like we've seen that countless times where we're measuring things, but it's not a perfect measure. And so
on that one, what Benji, well, I don't know if this is what you were referring to, but this is what you're making me think of, is on what we do, what's hard to measure and is imperfect is actually something that kind of at least irritates me or like makes me frustrated. Is we could rank a client, or we routinely rank clients for some bottom of funnel category keyword. Best CRM, to continue that example, IT software, running shoes for men, or whatever. And then someone sees it, reads the article, is like, this is really interesting. They're not ready for a lot of our B2B clients, like it's a big decision. They're not ready to request a demo now. They go talk to their boss or their team or their coworker. And then later when they decide like, oh yeah, let's do it. What do? They open up the homepage directly, or maybe some other coworker does, and then they type in the demo form. How does that show up in the analytics? As a direct thing to the homepage. How do most marketing teams perceive that? Oh, the brand did it. Someone just came to our homepage. They just knew it as a brand. If you rank, that's what you were saying earlier. If you rank for some bottom of funnel thing, is my specific example to grow and convert, but like any performance marketing, your ad, it could be an ad on whatever platform. It very well would likely just increase people searching and coming in like as showing up in GA as like direct to the homepage. It's going to, because you're not going to be able to. Someone reads the article on their phone because they Googled something on the subway.
The perfect example of this is when people spend money on non-branded search, what happens to their branded traffic?
Yeah,
it usually goes
almost
up.
Always goes up.
Yeah, and what happens the second people stop paying for Google ads? Their branded searches go down. Why is that? Because there's a correlation in it. If more people are seeing your ads and more people see your brand name come across, then there's also more people typing into Google your brand name to learn more about what you do. It's all related. And that's why I think like this whole debate and just trying to say one department is better than the other, this is what you should spend money on over this because of the story, or just like even broader, like it just doesn't make sense. It all goes together. I think it's really, companies need to think about, one, the stage they're at, two, how much resources they have available. Like companies have like limited amount of cash or maybe a ton of cash, and that dictates what you spend money on. How commoditized they are, what type of industry you're in. Like there's so many factors that weigh into what channels you should focus on when. That's why like it's just a dumb debate to even have, because every single business is going to need to make a different decision based on where they're at.
I think one other example before we lose that train of thought, I have seen clients try to measure brand in other clever ways. One is geographically. So there was a client that did a lot of TV advertising, and what they would do to test it is they would increase spend or completely remove spend from two different, I think, like zip codes or groups of zip codes that were otherwise comparable in sales. So if you're doing TV advertising nationally and you conclude that this area around, like Tampa Bay, Florida, sort of has historically matched sales with this place around Tempe, Arizona, or something like that, and then you can just shut off ads on one of them and see how sales do in general. See how much traffic directly to the homepage or whatever changes in those two geographies. That's a really clever way to do it. And you can also do that with brand-related online advertising, digital marketing. So if you're doing these kind of top of funnel or brand based like meta ads across Facebook, Instagram, or what have you, that aren't as like direct responsey, or YouTube video ads, you can also find two geographies if you're a big enough brand to do it, and do it that way. So yeah, there are ways to measure that. And I think the other thing I wanted to mention is like, you may be, if you're a real sort of suspicious listener, you may be thinking, oh, just as Benji was pointing out when he was showing people's posts, look, this person is like a brand marketer. Of course, they're going to say that. You may be thinking that about us. Of course, Grow and Convert is going to say this. But actually, if you look at our own marketing, I guess you can't, but we can tell you, because you don't necessarily know what we've done. Our own marketing, in a lot of ways, I could argue we grew mostly through kind of like hard to measure brand advertising. What we do for clients and what we're known for is bottom of funnel pain point SEO. But we didn't do that for ourselves until the last 2 years or something like that. Like, in other words, there was 4, 5, 6 years or something like that where we weren't doing SEO content ourselves. We were writing content, promoting it in communities, and just like getting people to understand it. That was like hard to attribute. And what we know is that it was easy for us because we only had that channel. And so people would say, oh, I've read your content for 3 years. And you're like, there you go. And so we're very comfortable operating in a space where we're getting these imperfect signals. So we add, what Benji's referring to is we ask in 2 places. On our form, if you fill out a form to work with us, we ask, how did you hear about us? We didn't used to, but also we ask that at the beginning of our sales call. Every single call, we say, let's just start off just for our own education. How did you hear about us? That's very anecdotal. We don't keep a log of it. There's no like spreadsheet that's like attributed, a little pie chart or something like that. But we have a sense that people say like, oh, like a bunch of people have been saying Twitter or something this year or something like that. Like versus like a bunch of people have been just saying like, I Googled it. Or a lot of people say like a friend told, like I asked friends or I asked an advisor and they told me like, you have to go check out Grow and Convert. So we know that like long-term awareness is there. I wanted to sort of highlight that like, yeah, you can operate under these imperfect things. A couple other points before we close that I wanted to mention. A huge kind of logistical detail in this post that's not equated for other people is Nike's wholesale business. There's a lot of detail in this post. We'll obviously put a link to the LinkedIn post that started this conversation in the show notes, so you can read it yourself about like Nike sort of non-investing or under-investing or pulling back on its partners, like in other words, other retailers that sell their shoes, department stores, shoe stores, or whatever. To me, like going back to just like the post and people drawing conclusions from it, that's like kind of silly. I kept being like, whoa, that's a huge part of it. Like if one of your major or if not major channel is that you sell your shoes through everything from like Macy's to, I think you can buy Nikes at like Costco and Foot Locker, and then you pull a bunch of spend from it, what do you think is going to happen? You know what I mean? And so then my question to like everyone else who's like reading these LinkedIn posts and being like, oh, we got to invest more in brand is like, do you sell at department stores? Do you sell in the mall? Are there like 1 million other retailers globally? I mean, I just know like the US ones. Like, I don't know, like just like 1 million in Europe or whatever that sell your product. If not, I'm not sure this like really applies to you. If you sell all of your stuff off of your website anyway, whether you are D2C e-commerce, whether you are B2B SaaS, whatever, then it could be that this 25 billion a day was just because they stopped offering deals or whatever to all of their wholesalers. Like, of course, that's like you have 40 years of selling through stores and you like pull a bunch of spend. Like, what do you think is going to happen? That's just like, it's like a simple explanation. What is that? Occam's razor? Like the simplest explanation is probably the obvious one.
If you like this video, don't forget to subscribe. You can also get the audio only versions of these shows wherever you get your podcasts. And you can follow us at growandconvert.com/newsletter for any articles and updates for when these videos come out.